Good evening, everyone. We're so excited tonight to gather for our second SareptaCircle discussion this evening. For those of you I've not met, my name is Coley Calabro, and I'm with Sarepta Therapeutics. And I'm honored to welcome you all tonight to this virtual conversation where we're going to focus our conversation on the journey toward acceptance and hope. So tonight's conversation will be led by two experts. We have Dr. Al Freedman, psychologist, and mom and engager, JB Crowley, who will be sharing their perspective on this topic, as well as providing some tangible approaches that you can hopefully apply to your day-to-day life and personal journey. As a reminder, the information tonight in our program is provided by Sarepta. It is for educational purposes only. It's not intended for medical advice, and for that medical advice, we do direct you to your healthcare team. This program will not discuss information regarding specific products, trials, or studies that are being run by Sarepta. For that specific information, we also ask that you contact your healthcare team or clinicaltrials.gov. And without further ado, I'd love to turn this over to our panelists, Dr. Al Freedman and JB, to get us going.
Welcome, everybody. Good evening. My name is Dr. Al Freedman. I'm coming to you from picturesque Westchester, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, where I am a practicing counseling psychologist, and I have a great deal of experience working with families affected by rare diseases. I'm joined by JB, who's Charlie's caregiver. Charlie lives with Duchenne. We're going to talk about who we are in just a minute, but before we get started, we want to thank Sarepta Therapeutics for having us join you today as part of the SareptaCircle program. We are being compensated by Sarepta Therapeutics for our time with you this evening. You're welcome to take notes, but after the program ends, the Sarepta team will be sending out an email to you with a summary of the webinar, as well as the takeaways that we discuss here this evening. So don't worry if you're not able to get everything written down. JB and I are going to start here by telling you a little bit about us. As I mentioned, I'm a practicing counseling psychologist. I work in independent practice. I'm working entirely by Zoom now because of COVID, and I specialize in supporting families affected by Duchenne and other rare diseases. I work with children. I work with families. I've worked with families all across the country who are faced with challenges that are similar to yours. And the reason that I have found my way to you this evening and to the work that I do is because I'm also a parent, and I was fortunate enough to be the dad of a young man affected by spinal muscular atrophy, another neuromuscular disease, who was diagnosed way back in 1995 and was given a year to live then. Jack lived 26 years, and I was very lucky to have him up until about a year ago. So I have been where you are as a parent, as well as being a professional who supports families like ours. And it's an honor and a privilege for me to be here to join you. And thank you. And JB, take it away.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad that you all are joining us tonight. I'm JB. My husband and I live in Virginia on the East Coast with our children, Charlie, who's 14, and Charlotte, who's 7. We call her Cece, and she is every bit his little sidekick. Charlie was diagnosed at the age of 3, right before his 4th birthday, and he is living with Duchenne. So I'm here tonight with Dr. Al to hopefully cover some topics that bring you hope and give you some tools for navigating this journey.
Thank you, JB. It's a pleasure to work with you tonight.
You too.
I want to acknowledge that each of you and each of our families are at different places in our journeys, and you're each in different places in your Duchenne journey. And I'm very well aware, both as a dad and as a doctor, that at the very beginning, when we receive a diagnosis of a neuromuscular disease for a child, it's scary. It's very common to feel shocked. It's common to be traumatized and to be angry, to feel like you don't know where to go with this information. And as we pass through the journey with our kids, sometimes we experience much grief and loss, and that happens at different times, and sometimes when we least expect it. And that's why this session is called The Journey Towards Hope, because it truly is a journey. For all of us, there are highs and there are lows along the way. There are challenges along the way. And what we hope tonight, JB and I, is to touch on some strategies that can help you and your family wherever you are in your journey.
Mm-hmm. As a parent, I completely understand where many of you are coming from, and you as well, Dr. Al, receiving your diagnosis with your son. We have a vision for, how our children's lives are going to play out. And sometimes when you have this rare disease diagnosis, you have to really think through, is that something that you have to abandon? That's not entirely true. You don't really have to walk away from much of that. It just means you might do some things differently. And while the journey is not easy, it's very hard. There are really tough days, but there's so much joy to be had and hope throughout their lifetime. For me and our family, we've chosen to navigate this from that perspective, that the good days are plentiful and the bad days are few. And we just want to be here for the parents every step of the way in navigating that.
Yeah, I don't think any of us ever forget the moment when we find out that our baby or our child has a neuromuscular disease like Duchenne. I think back to that day. It's kind of burned into my soul. November 7th, 1995, sitting in a room with a bunch of doctors in a children's hospital. I remember the faces of the doctors, the smell, the sounds, everything about that experience, because your life changes in an extraordinary way, in an unexpected way. And it's really hard because doctors, in our case, they told us a whole lot about what our baby wouldn't be able to do, and told us all about some scary things that no parent should ever have to hear, about medical needs and medical equipment and all kinds of stuff. So the doctors, they give you a lot of information, and they did their jobs by teaching us about our son's condition. But they don't leave you with a whole lot of hope, because doctors see kids when they're sick. They don't see kids when they're doing well. They don't see our kids when they're having good days. We parents do that. And I've experienced that myself, and I see so many families who find themselves in this situation too. So finding hope can be really difficult, but it's also really important. Mm-hmm. And I asked myself, thinking back, how did I find hope? How did I keep hope alive and feel positive in the face of such a challenging situation? Mm-hmm. And over the years, my family was able to find hope by really working at it and following our son's lead. He was a very happy little boy and a happy young man. It takes time, it takes work, and it takes effort to move from a place of fear to a place of hope. And my wish for all of you is that you're able to do that in a way that works for you. And I feel very blessed to have had the 26 years with my son, and I look back with a lot of gratitude. JP, I wonder if you could walk us through what it felt like when you received Charlie's diagnosis.
Sure. That's one of the things that, like you say, you can feel it, sense that, just place yourself right back there to that day. For us, it was December 15th. I remember what we were wearing. I remember, every question that doctor asked me. And leading up to that, it was almost a little bit of a prodding along, if you will, because I had started to notice things after a doctor's appointment. We went to just his regular, 3-year well visit. And the doctor asked, the questions: can they count to 20? Can they, jump with 2 feet? And, I looked at her and I thought, well, gosh, Charlie's not really jumping with 2 feet. And I asked him, can you jump with 2 feet? And, he did this little hop, it wasn't very organized. It was kind of like a little shuffle. And I thought, there might be something to that, but, you kind of dismiss it, you go along. And I mentioned it to the doctor and she didn't think much of it. But like I say, you start to notice things. And Charlie's preschool teacher mentioned that he just played a little differently than the rest of the kids. He wasn't as rough. He wasn't rough and tumble. He wasn't roughhousing. And so that was an indicator to her that he was playing just a little bit differently than most kids. So we started just kind of the process of questioning, who do we need to see? What's going on here? And everyone we met with, they thought that we were making more of this than what was there. But once we went to neurology, that doctor knew right away. He knew within 30 seconds. And he said, your son has Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Do you know what that is? And he recognized it right away by the Gower's sign. Charlie was rising from the floor, and he knew right away. And of course, they confirmed it with blood work. And like you say, you never forget that. When that call came, I was overwhelmed, overcome with emotion. I remember the call came in when I was at work, and I can clearly tell you who was present in the office that day, who answered the call, who put the call through, all of that. And I knew when I left that building, I had to get myself together. I was angry. I was crying. I threw up on the side of the road. But I knew that I had to pick Charlie up, and I had to continue on. And it was in that moment that I really decided this is going to define how we face this. I'm either going to pick him up and choose that I'm still mom and he's still my son, or I'm going to let this overwhelm my day and my days to come. And that's a really dangerous place to live in if you allow that to be what guides you and what steers you day to day. The sadness, the anger, the anxiety. I had a little bit of relief, if that makes sense, when we got the answers and we had a diagnosis. But then those feelings come back. You start to question everything. So it's a dangerous space to live in if you allow yourself to stay there. So I'm hoping that tonight we can give everyone tools to help navigate that.
Yeah, thank you, JB. Your story is so familiar to me in my work when I support families, especially not long after a new diagnosis. The stories they tell and the feelings that I hear about are very similar to yours. I think all of our families experienced something like it. And I remember that moment and hearing the news from the doctors, and Jack himself, our baby, was just in his stroller. He wanted his bottle. He wanted to get out of the room where everybody was sad. He just wanted to get on with things. He didn't know. He never really complained about anything. He just wanted to get on. And he gave me my first signal about how to move out of that feeling of dread that hit me when we got this news.
As they do, right? We have to sometimes take it hard from them.
Yeah, we often follow our kids' leads. That's what happened, and that's what happens for a lot of our families. Mm-hmm. I guess, JB, what I'd like to shift to is how you moved from that place of fear and those feelings of depression to a place of joy and hope for Charlie and for your family. I know that you, as we've gotten to know each other, you say that joy and hope are choices for you. You've made the choice to be joyful and hopeful. And I wonder if you could tell us more about how you make that choice to hope and joy and what that's like for you. How do you do that?
Everyone says choose joy, right? That's, something that goes around, and it's not always easy. I had to, like I mentioned, in the moment that he, had that final call and I was on my way to get him, I just decided, joy was going to be a choice. It was a gift that he's still here. It's a gift that, I'm able to pick him up from school, that we're able to even process what's happening. Having him here is a gift. And to realize the gift that is, joy comes with that. And joy is, it's a state of being, right? It's not an emotion. Happiness is an emotion, but joy is a choice. And for me, it's something that from the time I open my eyes in the morning, I just consciously put it on, just like a piece of my wardrobe. It is kind of a state that I refuse to move from every day. I'm so thankful for what we have. As far as fear and anger and resentment, those things happen, right? And sometimes, we deal with some scary things. Last year, Charlie was in the PICU. We had some incidents with his heart racing and high blood pressures, and then low blood pressures, and just a lot of machines and testing. And he's visited the PICU several times throughout his life and journey. And if I allowed any of that resentment or anger or fear to take over and ask, why my child, then I would miss out on the moment of sharing all of that with him and being present and being able to weather that storm with him, to process all those emotions, to be able to take him out of a place of worry and into a place of, talking about things that are important to him. Pokemon, cooking. He loves to cook. He loves hot foods. He loves brownies, anything we can think of while we're laying there to talk about. That brings us back to a place of joy and like the memories of doing these things. And, when I'm laying there with him and then the PICU, I don't want to talk about fear. I don't want to talk about resentment or anger. I want to talk about all the things that bring us joy and take his mind elsewhere. It's just really being in a place of realizing that if anger and resentment and sadness occupy the space in my mind, then I'm not able to allow joy in. But if I have joy or hope in the situation, then those other emotions don't have any room. There's no room. They can't occupy the same space. So that's kind of where we stay.
They can't occupy as much space anyway. And yeah, it's a very powerful perspective, JB. Thank you. But it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do.
No.
It takes time and it takes work. And our PICU was our home away from home for many years as well. It's important, I think, for all of us to remember there's no one way to do this, one right approach to any of this. We're all going to have good days and we're going to have some not so good days. We're all human. It's okay to feel the way we feel. But I think, JB, your story and the way you are approaching your life with Charlie is very powerful and very important for all of us.
Thanks.
And I think what we'd like to do tonight is to leave you with some concrete and tangible tips on how to move yourself from a place, if you're feeling sad or you're feeling fearful, to a place of hope and joy and love, and give you some tangible tips. So we're gonna, you alluded just now, JB, to the fun stuff you talk about in the PICU, things that Charlie likes. And so our first tip that we're going to share with you tonight is to make a favorites list. And we'd like to suggest that you experiment with this maybe later this week, to grab a piece of paper and sit down with your child and ask them questions about what they love and what they're interested in. And it could be anything. It could be video games. It could be Pokemon. It could be their pets. See where the conversation leads you. Sometimes we think of our kids and we think of all the challenges they face, and we just kind of automatically want to make everything easier for them. That's what we do as parents and caregivers. And our kids need unusual things. They need wheelchairs, they need ramps, and they need medical care, and they need attention in unusual ways. But that's my experience as a dad and my experience as Dr. Al. That's not what our kids are focused on. Our kids are thinking about the things they want to learn about, things they want to do, things they want to see. So I think it'd be great if you gave this a try and sit down and make a list of the things they love to do, and see if you can find the time to attend to that list. And JB, you've mentioned that this is something that you've done with Charlie and your family.
Yeah, this was something that came about really naturally for us. I started being very present, like in just the thoughts that we were having during these times, and really finding a way to replace their thoughts and what my son was thinking, at the time, not just me, but also realizing that my emotions were going to steer where he was headed in an emotional way. And I think, the favorites list for us, it always helps me bring things back to center, focused on what he enjoys, what he likes. And it really helps me get to know him so much better. And the favorites list changes, whatever season of life he's in. It was very different 3-5 years ago, right? It was very different than it is now with him at 14. So I've had to learn things and adapt along the way too. But I think it's important because what it tells them is that what's important to them is important to me. And, our daughter and our son, that was a main idea for me in creating this favorites list. Was I wanted them to know that the little things in their life, the little things that brought them joy, I was going to learn about. I was going to make it a point to invest in those things. They might say, Mom, do you have time for this? Because I work from home, I homeschool, right? We're all busy at home. But they'll say, Mom, are you working right now? Do you have time? And, I stop right there and I just say, yes, I have the time. I want to hear what's important to you. And I think in our situation, things are a little bit more fragile than most, right? Like we're very present in thought of the fragility of life and these moments. And so when you stop and you say, yes, what's important to you is important to me. It just really helps them understand that in the time that you have, they are the priority. I think that with Charlie, as he's gotten older, the shift has been more, he wants to do normal things. Like he wants to find a job, right? That was on the favorites list. Mom, I really want to start looking at ways that I can contribute, ways that I can earn money. He's only 14, but there's so much he can do. And so we had to make a list, where do you want to work? What are you able to do? Not what you can't do, but what are you able to do? And let's find something that, is a good fit for you. And that's really what steered his current job. He's taken this list from something, that we use when it's scary and when it's hard to now shaping who he is as a young person. So the list has come in handy, not just in the scary times, but also in shifting our interest as a family. Well, I will tell you one thing that I have to brag on him a little bit and on our neighborhood, but the job that he has is here in our local neighborhood. He's a delivery guy for a local bistro. And one of the things that's really neat is that when you have a list like this, like the favorites list, you understand that this time in their life, it looks different. Like I said, it's shaped differently than even 3 and 5 years ago. But we knew that it was important for him to have the job. And so the community has gotten behind that. And now he has, all of these homes that he delivers to. They've created a little uniform for him, and it's really empowered him to step into a place of autonomy, which is nice.
Thanks, JB. And I was going to add that when I work with families like ours, what the kids tell me is that, and what they experience, is that there's so little in their control because of Duchenne or any other unusual rare disease that affects kids physically. There's so much control that they lack. So by focusing on their interests and their needs, they feel a sense of control. Charlie has a job. My son had a job too, and he had his favorite places to go and favorite people to see, and loved to have friends come play a computer game with him. It was hard to travel with him, and others came to him. He had his list, and it was a real gift to focus on the things that gave him joy. And it's great to hear that Charlie has a job and is making those deliveries. This idea of a favorites list would be different for every family and every child. We all have different family patterns and habits and traditions, and our kids have different interests. So it'll be different for everybody. What is similar for our families is that our calendars are often filled with doctor's appointments and all kinds of school activities and special education stuff and wheelchair repairs. And so our days can be filled with all kinds of things, and some of them are unpredictable. When we take the time to focus on what our kids are interested in, it really helps them feel empowered and helps them to feel that we're paying attention to what is their favorite thing to do.
Yeah, I have to chuckle a little bit. This favorites list has gotten us into trouble recently. We were having a really scary time in the hospital right before Christmas this last year. And it was a very scary time. I was, coming back to the favorites list for anything I could to kind of pull us out of that and, think through like, okay, he's coming to the age for a job. It's time to start having these conversations. And suddenly they took a turn and they were very serious. And Charlie said, Mom, I've wanted some tortoises for a long time. And when I get out of the hospital, I think we should look at that. I think we should consider getting these tortoises. And Dr. Al, I have to tell you, from that point on, every conversation in that time, that 10 days in the PICU was focused on tortoise supplies. Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? How are we going to get these tortoises? So it does get you as a parent into a little bit of trouble too, trying to create these opportunities. But it's just, for him, it takes him out of that space. And for me too, it helps me to focus on, just the things that he can do. He can take care of these tortoises. Why would we not have them? It's a little bit extra on our plate, right? But as a Duchenne family, as you know, we kind of roll with the punches. So that's where it landed us.
Yeah. And I'm remembering being in the PICU and having my son, he used an eye gaze. He couldn't use a computer mouse, but even when he was sick, he was on Facebook Messenger trying to make dates with girls and friends. Yeah. And he was telling me when we were going to go to the mall to meet his buddies.
That's right.
And I have to say, this is great, Jack, but we got to get out of the hospital first. But he was forward thinking when he was in that situation. So, yeah, we all need things to look forward to, and our kids do too. So keep in mind the idea of a favorites list, and we hope it might help you with your child and your family as you move forward. That's tip number 1. We're going to move on to tip number 2 now. JB, could you introduce our second tip for this evening?
Oh, sure. So this goes back to the whole idea of kind of putting on joy every day. But, in the beginning, I really had to focus on how to do that. It wasn't so much, I knew I needed to do it, right, to face everything that was coming, but I did not know early on the tools for making those decisions. And so I started really practicing daily mindset shifts, like catching myself in the moment of when I'm experiencing these moments of fear or anxiety, really kind of taking captive what I was thinking about and shifting it immediately to something that I'm finding gratitude in, or where I'm finding joy in that day. I had, full on ugly cry moments, right? Like all of us do sometimes. But I just needed to figure out a way every day to center my thoughts on the things that were good, the things that I knew to be true, not the what ifs, not the things that might happen, but the things that were happening in the moment. And so one of the ways that I did that was I created a daily mantra, if you will, just something that I repeat every day. The first thing when I wake up, I'm grateful for another day that I can be his caregiver, right? Like I'm grateful for the fact that I'm just simply on the earth with him, and able to do all that I'm called to do, right, with him. But then I immediately am met with all the things that are coming that day, right? So the things that are hard, the things that are tough, we might have appointments. So you have to capture all of that and decide that you're still going to be in that place of gratitude. You're still going to be in that place of joy. And for me, the way that I'm able to do that is I can control kind of what's happening in our house. And this is something that will feel different for everyone. But I'm able to control my thoughts and how I approach things. But I can immediately begin to shift my focus off of the what ifs. It definitely brings me comfort. It brings me to a sense of peace to start my day with. And I'm stepping out into the day in this mindset.
Yeah, this is really important, JB, in that there's so many things in life that we can't control. I talked before about kids feeling a sense of control. Mm-hmm. There's so many things we can't control that none of us can. When we have Duchenne or another rare disease in the family, there's so much uncertainty that we live with. And it's really important to not get caught up too much in the what ifs, because it's so easy to do that when you have so much uncertainty. It was for me too. So staying in the present rather than thinking too far ahead helps many families and parents with the daily mindset shifts. To shift from the future to the present is one way to do that. And also creating a mantra can help you start your day with intention. And many families have a mantra. It's a way to sort of change a channel. Like if you're watching a TV show you don't like, you pick up the remote and you change the channel. A mantra can help us with a mind shift to help change that channel if our mind is taking us to places that are burdening us instead of supporting us. My own son's mantra was one word. It was attitude, because he heard a teacher say that when we were doing water aerobics on vacation in a swimming pool. The teacher was working the group hard, and she said attitude. So Jack kept on imitating teacher Jackie for many years. Attitude. When we ran into a challenging situation or a disappointment or something that didn't go our way, if I needed a mindset shift, sometimes it came from my son himself, who would just say, he would drive his wheelchair up and say, attitude, Dad. It really can go a long way to have that kind of mantra to shift your thinking, change your channel.
Yeah, I think it's so important, especially like, again, here we are learning from him, right? Like taking a card from our son. I think everybody's mantra can even shift over time, right? It might be where you are in that particular season. I know for me, I always start the day with today is a great day for a cure. And if it's not today, help me face everything about this day with joy and gratitude for the moment that I have, right? So like, I am always very conscious of the people who are working on that cure. It really helps me to know that people are hard at work for us. They're going to battle for us, whether it's doctors, the admin team, right? The person typing in prescriptions, the person working, with the petri dishes in the lab. I just am very conscious that other people are going to battle for me. And that really helps me stay centered and helps me with my mantra. And that's why I'm able to reach that place, right, of joy and gratitude, because I know that good things are coming, right? Like I have to focus on that. For me, one way that I'm able to look back on all of this and is see how all of these thoughts have patterns and how we're able to kind of connect the dots and how we're feeling is journaling. And I know at first I was not a journaling person. I just never had been one to really like hash out my thoughts. But I have to tell you, a brain dump is essential in this journey. I feel like, the more that I'm conscious of what I'm thinking about and where my intentions are and what I'm focusing on, all of that is very evident when you start to write it down. And whether that journal is a place of gratitude every day or a place of, frustration, like we write down where we had moments of frustration or anxiety or what brought us fear, or just those quiet moments where we find tears, right? Like you're able to see the patterns. It's all for me also like who I'm surrounding myself with and who's speaking into my life. But with the journaling and all the patterns, I'm able to see where I'm set up for success. And I think that as a caregiver and a parent, it's really important that we do that. We set ourselves up for an optimal day.
I agree, JB. And many of the families I work with use journaling as a way to, as you said, do a brain dump. I've continued to journal. As a psychologist, I can tell you that people feel relieved when they just get out from their heads what's inside their heads. And they do that with me by talking it out. But you can also, when you write things down, you're getting thoughts out of your head and putting them somewhere else. It's as simple as that and as complicated as that. And you also have a record of how you were feeling and what was happening at the time. And that record is very helpful and important to be able to look back on. And I'm using my own journals now to help me write a book about my experience being Jack's dad and helping other families. So I would encourage journaling as a way to take care of yourself, and it serves many purposes.
Self-care. It really is a form of self-care, same as exercise or something like that.
Yeah, it's a form of self-care. And I think it's also really important to broaden this conversation about self-care. We hear that phrase a lot. We have to take care of ourselves in order to take care of our kids. And I knew over all those years that if I didn't keep myself healthy, I wouldn't be able to take care of my son. So I made sleep, nutrition a priority for myself. I found exercise was really important to my well-being. So I kept to, and I still keep to, a regular exercise routine. I run. I'm outside running 3-4 miles at least every other day. And when Jack was little, I'd take him with me, and we had like an adapted running stroller, and I would take him out with me. It's important for us to take care of ourselves by taking breaks from the intensity of our parenting experience, and regular contact with our friends, with family, was really very, very important to broaden our perspectives and have time to interact with other people who aren't burdened in the same way. And another way that I looked after myself was to make it a priority to support my son's team of nurses who took care of him. And it's not easy these days to get nurses who are reliable and who you trust with your kids. But I put a lot of time into that, and because I knew that if we had solid nursing staff in that team, Jack would be cared for, and I would be better able to take care of myself. And it was especially true when it came to nights and being able to sleep. So all of these things I've lived as a dad, and I see as I support other families like ours, JB. It's really important that we take care of our emotional health as well as our physical health. They all go together. They all go together. This is hard to do. It's easy to say. It's hard to do when you have kids like ours, but it's really very, very important because even if we do it just a little bit each day, it helps us and it helps our kids.
Yeah, I definitely know and can feel when I'm not, getting any version of self-care, right? Whatever that looks like for people. It doesn't always have to be a day at the spa, right? Like that's, I have friends who that's their idea of self-care, and that's just not going to work for me. Mine's more, like getting out in nature, just taking a walk, feeling the sun on my skin. That feeds my soul, right? Just even sometimes stepping outside. If I'm going to cry, I might as well do it, surrounded by birds singing and, have a little different environment. So I think that even just walking around the block once or twice really helps me. And I make sure that I do it every day. Even sometimes it's after they go to bed, I just take a little stroll around the block, but it really helps me to just to feel a different set of senses, right? Like you get so stuck sometimes being in your home, caregiving, even just letting go of the tension from the workday, right? So, I work from home, I school from home, I'm caregiving. So just giving yourself a different environment sometimes really is self-care, just stepping into that. But one of the things when we were talking about mind shifts and really taking captive your thoughts and being mindful, I think that self-care and teaching our children how to do that is so important. I've noticed that with our daughter, she's very mindful of how she's feeling, where her emotions are. She calls it her gauge, but she is very into recognizing how she's feeling, and she's 7. But I think that it's because she has seen us really put names to the emotions and talk about them. And Charlie too, we are constantly making sure that we're shaping the narrative of his day, right? Like, what does his soundtrack look like and sound like? What is he hearing? What is he feeling? And by being mindful of what we're saying or how we're navigating those things, it really sets them up to have a different perspective on all of this. And admittedly, sometimes that can be a little silly, but one of the things that our family does, and this might be something that could work for other families too, is we've come up with a little bit of a family moniker or like a family name, just really to kind of put a physical character or something to what we feel about ourselves. And that's, if you've ever seen Monsters, Inc., it's Team Uzma Kappa. They're monsters that, don't look like the other fittest, scariest monsters, right? They're kind of a little bit of a hodgepodge of characters, and they don't look the best. They don't, they're not the fastest. They're not the most put together, but they cross the finish line at the end. And I think that's really, for our family, always keeping our mindset in check, our emotions in check, making sure that we are taking care of ourselves. We're able to be present and we're able to present our best version. It may not always be pretty, but it's going to get the job done and we're going to cross the finish line. So Team Uzma Kappa is ours, Team OK. And that's kind of, it's a little bit of a mindset, really, for us. We're Team OK. It may not be the fastest, it may not be the prettiest, but we're going to make it and it's going to be great. Yeah.
I love Team OK. To me, it's a symbol of that shift from when our kids are diagnosed and we're feeling fearful to hope, from fear to hope. And I love Team OK. I think I know a lot of families who are part of Team OK along with you, and we're all doing our best. And it's okay to be okay, when we're faced with so many different challenges. I appreciate you sharing that. That's Team OK. So our second bunch of tips, just to summarize, mind shifts, positive attitude, mantras. These are all important ways to take care of our kids and also to take care of ourselves in different ways. And another tip that I'd like to add tonight is it really helps families, and it helped me to find inspiration from others who have kind of been there and done that. It was so scary to receive my son's diagnosis, and it helped so much for me to make connections with others in the community. In our case, it was the SMA, or spinal muscular atrophy community, another neuromuscular disease. But it helped so much to make connections with other people who found themselves in what I call the twilight zone. It's like in diagnosis, I always say that I felt like I was launched into this other place, this twilight zone that most people couldn't possibly relate to or understand because it was so unusual and so scary. But others who were launched to the same twilight zone before we were have already gotten acclimated. And when we find our way to a community of others who have something in common with us, we feel connected and we feel supported and we can teach each other. So I'd like to just offer that as another tip, because in our cases, it's really important, because our situations are so unusual, to find those connections with others who we can look to, who've been there and who are a little bit ahead of us on the journey. And that helped me a great deal and still does. People around the world who have kids who are as unusual as mine, and who can relate to the journey that we're on. It helps to hear from people who've met challenges and how they face those challenges in different ways, and find people in our communities who carry themselves with grace and dignity in the face of adversity. It goes a long way, especially when we're faced with the challenge of a progressive disease and our kids are not able to do the same things that other kids can do. It's helpful to have an understanding of expectations and goals and what we can strive for that others have preceded us. So that in my experience, that human connection with others who have something in common with us brings a lot of nourishment. But fuel in our tanks is the way I put it, emotional fuel in our tanks, because there's so many times that we're using emotional fuel. We need to be refueled, and it often comes from others who've been there. I hope that you all will consider looking into support groups, advocacy groups. Within the Duchenne community, there are many programs and activities and events and camps and outings that can help foster a sense of community and help us feel connected to others who can relate to our experience. JB, would you like to comment on that? Any suggestions on that?
Sure. There's several great ones. And when I say great, I mean great. They're 100% dedicated to the community that we are. PPMD, Child Neurology Foundation, JET Foundation, Cure Duchenne, Sarepta even, for putting things like this together and clinical trials, but also these just engagement opportunities, right? We're able to reach people in such different ways now. And so Sarepta is a big part of that. I know many of these organizations are doing that with families. And back to your point, I agree wholeheartedly about connection. I think, that's one of the things that people do right away, right? Like when you're first diagnosed, you instantly begin looking on Facebook for groups. You find, whoever you can cling to sometimes, right? Who's been there, who can answer questions. This is really hard information to digest. And I am one of those people who I did not allow myself to Google or anything when we were beginning this process of diagnosis. And when I felt something just within me that there was something going on, I didn't allow myself to Google. And so once we were diagnosed, the MDA reached out to us, our neurologist put them in touch with us, and I wasn't quite ready, right? Like I wasn't there yet. I had to get there quickly because there was an MDA walk in 2 weeks and we were going to have a team, daggone it. We were going to do the things, right? We were going to get involved. But, for me, I had to get there. I had to really just muscle up, no pun intended, but I had to get there and mentally, emotionally. I could choose joy for myself, but when I'm surrounded by it and I'm looking at, all of the people in this community and maybe seeing those people who are ahead of you, that's a scary thing sometimes. But I find such comfort now in meeting those people who are a step ahead of us, and even for Charlie to see that there's so much life, that they're still living and still experiencing things, and they're into many of the same things he's into. And so I'm glad that I was able to get there. And everybody has to do that in their own time. They have to mentally and emotionally be ready. Sometimes the kids might be the driving force. Like we've mentioned, sometimes we're taking a note from our sons, but, that might be what gets us there very quickly, is their desire to be involved with kids like them. I want to talk a little bit just briefly about like building our community and who we do allow into our circle, and who we allow to really speak life and speak over our children, and our family. As a mom, it's really easy for us to cling to one another, and dads too. I know my husband is involved with several other Duchenne dads, and we look to them to be our community and our shoulder, and also to be that for them. But in doing that, we've been very selective about the people that we, are drawn to. And one of the things that I think is very important is know where you are, know who you are in this journey, and find your tribe, right? Find the people who are mirroring that for you. Also, who may challenge you on some of the things that you think to be true, but doing so in a way that's encouraging and really lifting each other up, supporting each other, surrounding yourself with those people who you would desire to be part of your tribe, not just who happens to walk in, right? So it's about cultivating that. And I think we do that a lot for our children. Like it's a natural thing for us to want to shape their friendship groups and who they associate with. But I think it's important for us to really use that as a method of self-care. Take care of yourself by really cultivating who you surround yourself with and who you allow to speak into your life, especially in this journey.
That's excellent advice, JB. With or without a neuromuscular disease, it's excellent advice. And one other thing you said that I want to just be sure to comment on, we're all at different stages of the journey, and our readiness to interact with others in this case, the Duchenne community, may vary. I know that when I facilitate support groups for families affected by different rare diseases, there are some families, especially who have more recent diagnosis, who aren't ready yet to actively participate in the group, but they benefit from just listening in. And so my expectations as a facilitator for families vary, and I don't expect people to jump right in with both feet immediately. We have to find our way there. When I went to my first SMA conference, I didn't even want to register. I thought, if I don't sign the thing at the table, then maybe Jack won't have SMA. It takes time for you to feel comfortable participating. But once you get comfortable, it really fuels us and it can go a long way. In terms of the more local community, it can be really helpful to find people within your local communities who are there for you, not just the medical people. And that can mean involvement from your child's school, with the school, extracurricular activities. People want to help. It's what I have found over the years is people really do want to help our families, and they don't know how. And sometimes we help them to know how they can help us, and they jump at the chance when they can. My own son wanted to go see my daughter was a softball player when she was younger. She's 22 now, but the softball field wasn't accessible, so he couldn't go see her play. That disappointed him. But one of his friends at high school was a Boy Scout who needed to choose an Eagle Scout, and he made his Eagle Scout project making this softball field accessible so that people with a wheelchair could go and watch the games as other spectators did. And this Boy Scout friend of Jack's, he got raised money to get bricks, and he built this beautifully accessible pathway and ramp so Jack could attend my daughter's baseball games, softball games, and others. One elderly gentleman came and thanked Jack while he was watching the game because he could come and watch his grandson's baseball game because of the project. So everybody felt really good about that. It was a symbol of community support for Jack, and it helped bring out the best in everybody, and everybody won. So that's just one example of what happened. People rallied to support us and want to help. There are a lot of different groups, a lot of different supports, a lot of different interests our kids have, and so everyone's situation is different. You may want to refer back to your child's favorites list that we started with to think about ways to get connected through your school or through activities that are available in your local community. JB, I know from talking with you and getting to know you that Charlie has lots of interests. What kind of groups does he participate in your community?
He definitely, like going back to the interest change, but one thing that's, the same for us is Pokemon. He's even at 14, his friends are into that. They've grown into D&D or Dungeons and Dragons. That's another favorite one. And it's a little bit of a role-playing game. So it gets quite animated, but they all meet at the local bistro down the street. And he's got another kid that's in a chair that, participates in that too. So there are people from, it's kind of an equalizer, right? It's not just for kids in chairs, and it's not just for able-bodied, it's an equalizer. And that's kind of what he's finding as he gets older. He's surrounding himself with people in the community that are, different abilities. One thing, when we're talking about building community, he's not quite there yet with Duchenne and forming these relationships with the other boys, because he very much presents himself as Charlie, not Charlie, a teenager with Duchenne, right? So he's still very much in a place of just presenting his interest and not, some people don't even know that we have a son in a wheelchair. We just talk about Charlie. And then when we show up, they see that he has a chair. It's just not something that leads our conversation. And he knows who he is. He is very comfortable in who he is. And so we have allowed that to kind of take the lead and step back a bit from shaping his community. He's able now to make those decisions, but he knows what his values are, and he knows really confidently who he is. And so we're finding, his interests change, and we're open to him exploring those things because he is pretty confident in who he is.
Sounds like a wonderful kid, and I hope to have a chance to meet him, JP.
Me too.
I know that it is just to finish up here and offer some perspective tonight. Our kids are challenged by being affected by a rare disease, and it's really tough when we get started, when we hear this news. What I've learned in my years with my son over a long period of time is it took me a while to figure this out, along with the rare disease comes some unusual rare gifts too. And our kids have the gift of resilience. They have the gift of determination. They have the gift of being pioneers. They try new things. They have the gift of offering others perspective. You know, when my son drove his chair into a room, everybody's big problems got small real fast without him saying a word. They have the gift of drawing very open-hearted, compassionate people to their lives. My son is an amazing magnet for really open-hearted, wonderful people, and they bring out the best in us. So I encourage us all to view our unusual experience in creative ways and in positive ways, as we've shared tonight, and to understand that our kids have a lot of unusual gifts along with the unusual challenges they face.
It's so true. Their gifts really outweigh any of our hardship, and, even on our toughest days, right? Just to think and really take in who they are and what they're offering, to not only to our families, but to the world, even like, as you said, about perspective and hope. We currently are staying at a hotel, and the valet last night mentioned, he's like, gosh, I'm so glad I had the opportunity to meet your son. And I think in that moment, it just solidified for me kind of how I feel every day, right? Like, he had a 5-second encounter, with us, but it impacted him. And I feel like everyone in this community has that opportunity. And when you take a minute to think about how that applies to your family, this stranger felt that way from a 30-second maybe encounter. How could I not feel that way every day, right? Being surrounded by this young person so full of, just a gift of wisdom and many times perspective. And, hope for us, it's not something that it's not an emotion. It's not a feeling. It's like an aspiration in this journey. It's something that you create within your own set of circumstances. For us, it's not only hope for what's possible for him, but also like for our community. And I think that there is so much to be hopeful for. And that really shapes us. And I pray that it shapes all of us in this community, because there are so many things to be hopeful for. Just when I think about my son's desire to keep going, I have to keep going and being a part of this adventure. It's what keeps me pushing through all of the really tough stuff, because he's so worthy of that. So just thinking about it from that perspective, the hope that we have and the joy that we have, most of that would not be possible without the rainy days too, and the gift that he is for us and in our life. I would not have chosen, this perspective, prior to this diagnosis. I did not contemplate choosing joy every day. Like, it wasn't a mindful thing for me. But I have no choice to choose that. With Charlie, I have to do that. He's worthy of all of that.
Charlie's lucky to have you. And you do have a choice. You're making the choice to be hopeful. And I wish we could have done this in person. But even so, like, the hope is just coming through my computer screen when you talk, JB. And it's been a pleasure to get to know you.
Likewise.
Privileged to partner with you tonight.
Likewise.
JB and I are gonna wrap up now, and we're going to offer time for you to ask questions, for us to respond to them as best we can. We appreciate your attention for this long, and we hope that our talk has been supportive to you as you care for your kids. Thank you for having us, Coley.
Yeah, thank you, Coley.
Well, thank you. You guys are a gift. Your stories are an absolute gift. As I always say when we get together, I could sit with you all night. So I hate that our time is limited. I think we have time for like a really great question that did come through. This question is going to be for both of you. Maybe I'll start with JB. So a question came in that said, how do you help unaffected siblings learn to handle the diagnosis of their sibling living with Duchenne? In this instance, the older sibling, they've kept it simple in telling them about the younger sibling that was diagnosed. But now they are a little bit concerned about that their older child is worrying about things that their little brother, about their little brother, and maybe not sharing it with the parents.
Yeah, I definitely can see this, and we do see this a lot. I talk to many other moms who are going through this. When I think about information and where they might find that, where that fear might be coming from or that anxiety, I think transparency is really important, but at a level that they're able, like age appropriate, to understand. Because if you allow them the opportunity to find that information or to have other people shape that narrative for them, like friend groups, or in our case, we've had friends' parents who have tried to shape that narrative. We find that the information is best understood and left at a level that is where we're comfortable as well, if we start that conversation. So if we're proactive in, just leaving that channel open, making sure that, they know that they can come to us, that we're able to present things in a way that's easily understood and not necessarily talking down or talking up, at their level. But I think it's normal and completely natural for them to be concerned about their younger sibling, right? This is scary, and validating that, but also teaching them skills to not let that be what runs away, right? Like that can't be a runaway train for them. They can't perseverate on that. And so really teaching them about mindfulness, teaching them about how to navigate these questions and allow the information to soak in, but not take over. There are strategies for that. And I know Dr. Al can probably speak to that too, but I think it's really important that it comes from us. And if you're wanting to shape that fear and shape that narrative, it has to come from the parent.
Yeah. Thank you, JB. This is a great question. And I have done whole sessions on this question alone. And it's a very common question for Dr. Al to receive, because our siblings understandably receive less physical attention from us. We don't need to have our hands on them the same way we need to care for our kids affected by Duchenne or other rare diseases. So our siblings tend to become very independent, and they want to help. And Coley, embedded in that question was the point that the siblings don't want to burden us parents any more than we're already burdened. So they sometimes keep things to themselves, and they do need an outlet. My daughter is 22 now, was just interviewed about a month ago for almost an hour on a podcast about being Jack's sister. And I was surprised by some of the things she said. And without belaboring this, one of the things she said that shouldn't have surprised me, I'm a child psychologist, was that she didn't realize there was anything unusual going on. When she was very, very little, she thought everybody had a big brother with a wheelchair. And it wasn't until she was like in first grade and had a play date at our house, and her little friend who was 6 years old stared at Jack and was confused by him, that she figured out, oh, there's something different about my family that I didn't realize before. So as JB said, kids understand things at different ages and can have things explained to them at different times, and based on their age and what they can understand. And we want to tell them enough that they have the information to answer their questions, but not so much to overwhelm them. And I agree wholeheartedly with JB that it's really important for our siblings to hear the information from parents before they hear it from someone else, or before they read it on the internet, which sometimes with the families I see in my practice, sometimes when parents aren't forthcoming, the kids find the stuff out anyway, and then they're sometimes need help processing what they're exposed to. So that's a great question, and we could do a whole session on just that. And we do need to look after all of our kids, not just our child with Duchenne's. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Both JB and Dr. Freedman, I know I speak for the entire audience when I express just the appreciation for both of you being here tonight, and your willingness to share just the raw personal perspective as well as the professional perspective. And I always thank you for your energy and just the wisdom that you're sharing, because I think this is incredibly supportive to the community. And And so thank you again for taking your time tonight.